Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because folks, life's too short to be miserable. YOLO, Inspiring Possible listeners, welcome back to another lovely episode. As you always know, we try to bring you people that will hopefully give you some insight into your life, or maybe just give you a different perspective. They might share their story, some things that they've learned along the way that have helped to get them where they are today. So hopefully something in today's guest will resonate with you. But I have a very, very, very special guest today who is going to share a little bit about some of the challenges he's faced, overcame, and that he's been able to have for him to create possibilities for himself. Because guys, it's about creating possibilities. So I want to welcome Jay. And Jay, I've made a very sinful mistake before I pushed the record button. I did not ask you how to pronounce your last name, so I'm not even going to try
No,
it.
of course you're going to try it. No, of course you can try it. You go.
Okay.
Just a very easy last name. Go ahead, try it.
I know, but I have like last name phobia. Sapovits.
Almost Sapovits.
Sapovits. See?
Yeah.
Butcher. If there could be a thing next to my name, it's like I will butcher your name.
Well, it wasn't
That's
that
funny.
bad. I mean, the O is silent versus, or the O is, short versus long. Listen, I go by J Sap. I go by Sappy.
Okay, I can do that. JSAP.
J
JSAP is in
Sap.
the house today.
Yeah, J
Okay.
Sap. J Sap chats. J Sap. I've gone by. My friends call me Sappy. It's like a term of endearment. My dear friends, which is kind of funny because Sappy doesn't have the best connotation, but it's because I'm always a little bit like on the sentimental and definitely emotional side. I definitely am an emotional player. But yeah, I've gone by J Sap forever, and that's just the way it is. Yeah.
Okay, JSAP. Well, let's talk a little bit about life. And
Oof.
I know you now have a successful business and have done all the things. But what was interesting, as I was telling you before we pushed the record button, is I was looking at Jay's LinkedIn before we had our conversation today, and I think he has a little bit interesting life journey. So tell me a little bit about that and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah. I mean, grew up outside of Philadelphia. Dad was a school teacher in the highest crime rate city in the state of Pennsylvania. First to have metal detectors on the doors. Moved when I was a kid from that area to a little suburb of Wilmington, Delaware / Philly. That was like all DuPont corporate and Wilmington banking executive types. So,
Okay.
it was really an interesting upbringing in that my youth, I was either surrounded with people who didn't necessarily look like me, where I was around my dad who coached baseball and was the announcer for the basketball and football team at his high school, Chester High, or I was around these super wealthy kids who I had nothing in common with, right? Because my dad was a school teacher, mom was a bookkeeper. And it gave me that base of being able to communicate with anybody because I never knew the situation or the environment that I was going to be in. Concurrent to that, my dad loved the racetrack, like horses, right? You're in Louisiana, you got a bunch of horse racetracks down in Louisiana, right?
There is a few here, yes.
Right? People like to gamble. Caesar's down in the middle of.
They like to gamble here too. Yes.
I mean, they literally could not have put it in more of a central location. It's like I don't even know what. It's like nothing was there before Caesar's came in. But so my dad loved the racetrack, so I grew up going to the racetrack with my dad, and it fueled my love of gambling and a fast lifestyle. So when I was 17 years old, actually when I was 16 years old, I convinced my folks that I needed to go out and visit UNLV, which at the time had great basketball teams. Jerry Tarkanian was super relevant. And my best friend's older brother by a few years had gone out there. So we knew someone who was there. So at 16, I got on a plane. Mind you, this is 1987. You weren't even thought of in 1987, by the way.
Well, you know what? I was like 1 years old, Jay. I was 1 years old.
I don't even believe you were. So in 1987, me and my best friend got on a plane and went to Las Vegas and stayed with his brother for 10 days so I could tour the school to see if that's where I wanted to go to college. I never stepped foot on the campus. I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas, but
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's only once, only well, actually, I passed through, but yeah, really only once to actually visit
it
and see
used
the place.
the airport's a monster now. It used to be one way in, one way out, and that way was adjacent to the campus. So to
Oh,
not
wow, okay.
set foot on the campus in 1987 when you traveled cross country to visit the campus is extraordinary. It'd be like staying at Caesars and not going to Bourbon Street.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking
So
about you could throw a dime there. So I loved it. I loved the fast lifestyle. At 18 years old, I moved out to Las Vegas to attend UNLV, and that's where the mayhem started and continued. So that's definitely the first part of my life's journey where I watched my sister go to school 7 miles from, we're so influenced by the things that happen to us that are completely out of our control. My dad became a school teacher so he could have a solid living because my mom wanted to make sure that we could make a house payment and she wasn't willing to allow him to chase his dreams. So I got to watch my dad not pursue his dreams, which caused a certain level of angst that as a child I picked up on and always felt like it motivated me to not want to live that same life. We moved from a not nice area of town to a really nice area of town, but I never felt like I fit in. That influenced my life. I watched my sister pick a college 7 miles away from where we grew up. I saw her come home on weekends. That influenced my life. There's just so many things that happen to us that are completely out of our control
Oh,
that
100%. And especially in
influence
that those
us.
childhood and teenage years when, you really don't have a lot. I'm not saying that people don't move out at a young age and go live their life, but I mean, you are very much influenced by the factors that are around you, whether it be your family, whether it be the places you grow up. I mean, I'm in the South. That's a whole different ball game, but there's all those influences that, that create and shape who you are or how you view the world or how you interact with it and what choices you make. So it almost sounds like the safety and security that your family members, by the choice of their professions, really tried to bring, then that almost was like the antithesis of what you're like, "Okay, I don't want predictable. I want to do the opposite."
Yeah,
Is that
that's
what I'm
exactly
hearing?
100%
Yeah.
exactly right. And I became a risk taker very early on. And when I moved out to Las Vegas, I needed money because, I wasn't getting checks from mom and dad to fuel my lifestyle. So I always worked. And I was very fortunate. I got a job. Everything I've ever done in my life, I've had a touch of greatness aligned
Okay.
with it.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in an arrogant way. That's just what it's been, right?
Yeah.
And the first
If
touch
I'm
of
gonna go in and do this thing, Imma go for great. And
Yeah, I don't even know though that that's not exactly what I mean by it. What I mean by
okay.
it is, let me explain it because
Okay.
it'll probably come to light easier by giving an explanation. I got a job at a dry cleaners across the street from the college because it was within walking distance and it was a job I was very capable of doing. It was checking in people's clothes at a dry cleaners, right? We actually did the work on site. The dry cleaners did all the work for the university. This is a one shop location, one front desk, one owner, Vic Plasman. Nobody influenced my business career early on like Vic Plasman. Love him. He was like a second father to me. I would have been the dry cleaning king of Las Vegas had I had my head on straight at the time. I didn't, and I wasn't. So that's a different conversation for another time. I'm trying to think of the guy who was the dry cleaning king. It was Al Phillips. Al
Okay.
Phillips, the cleaner. Al Phillips, the cleaner. Yeah, he had drive-ins. He did drive-through drop-off service, and he had like 5 locations. He was a killer. very good businessman. But so was Vic. Vic had contracts with 5 casinos that were on the Las Vegas Strip: Caesar's Palace, Bally's, Flamingo, all the big ones at the time, right? This is way before Mirage was built, a couple years before the Mirage was up and going. That meant the executives of those casinos constantly were coming in. He also had the contract of the athletic department at UNLV. That meant all of the coaches were coming in. He also did Liberace's clothes. I don't know if you remember Liberace, but Liberace was very flamboyant in what he wore and very intricate in his clothes. And he had J.J. Walker from Good Times, Dynamite, do his radio and television advertisements. So when I said I was always close with greatness, I'm 18 years old working the front desk, the front counter with
I see
all
what
of
you're
the
saying. You were
clients.
exposed to, yeah,
Yes. Yes.
proximity.
I was with J.J. Walker. I was with Liberace. I met the head of the Nevada State Athletic Commission that owned the radio broadcasts for UNLV, who ended up liking me and hiring me to be the radio producer engineer for the UNLV basketball team. The year they won the NCAA championship, I traveled with the basketball team: Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, Greg Anthony. I'm 18, 19 years old, just like them. We're all together in the dorm rooms because I'm on the road with them. In fact, LJ and Stacey used to fight over who was going to get to sit next to me because I'm small and they're big, and they knew they could dominate and take more of my seat because if they sat next to each other, they were 2 huge guys sitting next to each other.
They're like, so we're gonna go sit next to Jay. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And Tart liked to have me carry his bags. But when I was on the road, who covered UNLV? Billy Packer, Dick Vitale, all Jim Nant, all the big time announcers always were covering the Rebels. So I was exposed and around this greatness very early on. So I just felt comfortable in that arena. And that was really, Christy, the big eye-opening happening that all these folks put their pants on one leg at a time like me. In
That's
fact,
what my mom always reminded me about stuff because I'd be like, if I fangirled over somebody or
yeah,
whatever, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to meet them. She's like, Christy, please remember that these people put their pants on one leg
yeah,
at a time.
yeah. But like Guy Fieri, for example, was at UNLV when I was at UNLV, but he wasn't Guy Fieri back then. So
Yeah.
it just felt like, and so that trend of being exposed to celebrity and being in sort of the deal flow of famous people kind of just existed for me throughout my college experience, and then ended up carrying on throughout my business life and even still does to this day.
So I'm wondering, is that proximity or just exposure to just, I think about exposure possibilities because you saw people who were doing things or living a certain way or living their best life, if that's what you want to call it. How did that exposure influence your journey from that point on?
My first job out of college, I got a job as a talk show host in Philadelphia on the #1 sports talk show station in the country at 23 years old. So I came back to the city that I was from and was
Did
on the
you think
radio.
you were coming back? I'm just curious. Did you think you were going to go back to Philly?
No, because when I was in college, I was on a national radio network, and I figured I was just going to get syndication out there and become a national radio broadcaster. But what happened, the station I was on went bankrupt. I didn't get paid my last 2 months of work. Uh, Another company came in, took some of the talent, not all of it. I was very young at the time and had not really built a name and or reputation for myself, but was good on air, which wasn't enough for the new company. And so the job I thought I had coming out of college, I didn't have anymore. My break there was I was introduced by one of the people who had been hired at WIP, 610 WIP in Philadelphia. They had been hired to do overnights. I'd worked with them in Vegas, Rod Stoll. Rod and Ray introduced me to the program director at WIP to fill in the nights and evenings that they weren't on the air and working, so the station would have live coverage and consistency. And I was so young that they could pay me basically nothing,
Yeah.
which in
And you're
fact they
like,
did.
"Yes, I will come and do it."
Yeah, it's exactly what. Then that's exactly what happened. And I did that for a couple years. Didn't have my head screwed on straight. Needed a lifestyle change for personal reasons. And yeah, and that's sort of where my story both ended and started.
Yeah, if you were to go back and maybe tell yourself, your younger version of you, something, is there anything that you would tell them that would, that you would wish you would have known earlier?
I knew and met a lot of people when I was very young, and those relationships at that age were incredibly transactional. And I didn't do enough to keep or continue those relationships throughout my later 20s. I sort of had pockets of relationships with people over time. So, from my 18 to 22, I had with this group of people that I was really close with. And then from 22 to 25, I had another group of people that I became very close with. And some of it had to do with proximity. But if you're asking me if I could go back in time, what would I do? I would work really hard once I moved on from a situation to reinvigorate the people and foster the older past relationships that I had, knowing that life is long. I didn't
Yeah.
realize life was long. I honestly thought you moved on from one situation. You got to remember, I didn't grow up in a business family. I grew up, my dad was a teacher. I didn't even know business existed, and I didn't know I was going to be in business. I thought I was going to be in radio, right? So I just I treated things on a transactional level as a young person. And it was the biggest mistake that I had ever made because I've been in the rooms with, like I've been in the rooms with Warren Buffett. And a number of my former colleagues had pictures of them and Warren Buffett. At the time, I remember saying to myself, I'm not going to get a picture with Warren Buffett. You know what I wish I had right now?
Picture.
Yeah. So again, I just treated these moments as like, again, more transactional and not seminal. And that would be my biggest piece of input to people who are just at the beginning is it's one thing to create a network, it's another thing to cultivate it. And I
You know what?
definitely didn't cultivate it.
It's so crazy because I'll be honest with you, I feel like I'm glad that you're telling me this because I feel like messages come to me. I feel like this is something I really need to probably refocus on. But I will say that a lot of relationships, even my own journey, I can think about how they're all interconnected. And like you said, throughout the journey, because it's not just, this one segment of time, how a lot of those nurturing of the relationships early on will sometimes come back to be some of your greatest assets
Of
later. I can think
course.
about some of my leadership team that I have that works with me on, on my business side of things. And all of those came from previous relationships. It
Yeah.
might not have been a relationship with that person, but it might have been a relationship with a person that knew that person and how that all kind of blends together to put you on the path. But I'm curious, so you thought you were gonna be in radio. How did you get from radio then to business, since that was not something that you had ever imagined yourself kind of entering into, for you?
Yeah. This is a good question. So it's 1997. I had met my now wife, at the time girlfriend, in 96, February of 96. She walked into the childhood. I was living at home with my parents, right? So I'm a big shot radio host on the number one station in the country, and I'm living at home with mom and dad at 24 years old, and just insane. So, a buddy of mine called me after I had done an overnight shift, said, "You want to go to lunch?" I never really answered the phone because I was sleeping. I slept 6 till whenever I woke up, but it was like 11:30, 12 o'clock. He called me, he said, "You want to go to lunch?" I said, "Sure." And into my house walked, he was with his girlfriend and she was with her best friend. And so I tell the story. I knew she was my wife the moment she walked into my house. I swear that the lunch we went on is our first date. she thinks I'm an idiot for
She thinks
saying that.
otherwise.
But yeah, so I knew that this was the person I was going to marry. Fast forward after I met her February of 16 of sorry, 96. I was gambling and living a lifestyle that was just not conducive to creating a life that she wanted. And she expressed that to me. I wasn't enjoying it anymore at that point. It was certainly, something I needed to do versus wanted to do. Straight up addiction, and needed to make a change. So in March of '97, I went into recovery and stopped gambling. I made my last bet March 6th, 1997, and I left the radio business 2 months later because I felt like I could no longer give my opinion on sports and safety. Meaning, the Eagles are playing the Cowboys, and I'm telling you who's going to win. I want to be right. Not such a good thing for Jay to want to be right. Took a what I now know to be a recovery job working at a local golf course. Mind you, I'm 25 years old, college graduate. I have a woman who's going to be my wife. I'm living at home in debt because that's what happens. And I had just resigned from a dream job on air in Philadelphia in the radio business. And I'm working in a cart shack in a suburb of Philadelphia, changing people's soft spikes, carrying their bags, picking up driving the driving range, caddying from time to time at a golf course. 25 years old, coming home, giving my wife the money that I made in tips, having my paycheck go directly to her as well. Again, my girlfriend at the time. And just got deeply into my recovery. And about 3 months in, my mind started to clear. And when you work on tips, it's not the first job I had in tips. I worked as a valet parking attendant on the Las Vegas Strip, in addition to the job I had in college at the dry cleaners. But when you work on tips, you notice trends. My mind was clearing. One of the trends I noticed is that there were gaps in the T sheet. So I'd asked the general manager at the time if I could look at the bookings. And I looked at the bookings and identified companies that were booking tee times. And I had come up with an idea that if I could sell those tee times in blocks to companies that didn't have bookings at a discount, that it would be a win-win. We'd fill times that we didn't have sold, and they would get a discount on golf. And what the hell did they care when they played? They were taking clients out anyway. And it was a nice course. So, who doesn't want revenue? The owner took me out of the cart shack, gave me my first sales job, and not enough money to live, but a commission. And I doubled the revenue of the golf course in 10 months. From there, one of the clients that we had put on these mini golf outings for was the presenting sponsor, meaning the second sponsor, of a senior PGA Tour event. It wasn't the Champions Tour back then, it was a senior PGA Tour. And I came up with the idea because of my experience in Philadelphia on air that I had this thesis. Philly's a major league sports town, not a minor league sports town. And the senior PGA Tour is a minor league sport. It was also sponsored by the phone company. So the presenting sponsor that I was talking to was the electric company. So I said to the people at the electric company, why are you playing second fiddle in a minor league event to the phone company? I can create a special event to the PGA Tour. We'll do a 1-day skins game and you can be the title sponsor. And they said yes. And the only issue was I didn't have the players that I told them that we could get. And I had to find the PGA Tour players who would say yes to playing in a skins game. Well, it turns out that there's a young professional at the time who was just starting his career as well and playing really well, named Jim Furyk. So after cold calling dozens of agents, struck up a relationship with Jim Furyk's agent, and he told me come in for a meeting. So I did what I know how to do, which is put together a PowerPoint And now, mind you, I had a verbal commitment from, at the time, the energy company, not a written commitment. I went to his office. I told my wife, she's from Boston. I told my wife, let's go to the Cape this weekend to visit her family. But I have one stop to make on the way. They were working out of like the Meadowlands, right outside of New York City. That's where Furyk's agent's office was. I said, I have one stop to make. I have a meeting that I have to take. So you're just going to have to sit in the car until the meeting's over. Way before cell phones.
Yeah.
She said, how long you going? She said, how long you going to be? I said, I'm either going to be 10 minutes, 2 hours, or I'm never coming home. And it ended up I was 2 hours. For two
Okay.
hours, she sat and waited. And next thing I know, Jim Furyk signed on to do the event. The event was called the Exelon Invitational, hosted by Jim Furyk, lasted 10 plus years. I sold after 4, but that's what I first created. And that was my foray and entry into business. That's how it all started. So clearing my mind, seeing a gap, finding a solution to the gap, to the problem, presenting it to the person who had the authority to help or give me the opportunity for that solution, and then seeing another gap, and then just running through that door. So my life has really been about seeing opportunities and not asking for permission to take them, and just going with my gut and doing them. That's what my life
Yeah.
has been.
Well, and let's talk about this. I mean, because I think sometimes people have a vision of maybe what they don't always know what they want in life, right? And
Mm,
I think that that's hard. Sometimes we talk about create a vision and then get the goals, and I've even talked about this on the podcast. But a little bit of what I'm hearing with your story is it wasn't that you always saw where you wanted to end up. It's just that you looked around with where you were at the moment and said, okay, what is the opportunity here? And you took proactive action, whereas other people might have saw the same problem you did, probably for a long time at that course. There's these open tea times, right? But nobody maybe ever said, how can we find a solution to remedy this? And from that one action, it then yielded all these other opportunities that kind of, I guess, snowballed along the way. But it was each of you trying to take that proactive action when you saw that opportunity there.
I have an argument with my staff. Right, obviously, I run a promotional marketing firm now, and I have a lot of designers that I work with, and I always tell them I'm a creative. And they battle me and they argue with me. But the reality is that when you're an entrepreneur, you better be creative, because you,
1,000%. We might not be artistic creative. I mean, don't ask me to paint a picture,
yeah,
okay?
for sure,
But I do think you are creating something out of nothing. So you created an opportunity. And
yes,
then again, I'll be honest with you, Jay, I'm not big into golf. I don't really know much about it, but it almost sounds like you created an event that was not there before, then lasted for a good bit.
yeah.
And then you were able to also then just have that, that continue. And so, I mean, yeah, that is
It's
creation. It's so taking something and creating something out of
totally,
nothing that then
yeah.
also not benefits not only sometimes yourself, but it also benefits people around you, you know?
It benefits every for course. I mean, the community
Mhm.
was the community. It was an incredible event for the community, and for to this day. And Jim's now what, 54 years old or something great, and 55, maybe older, but he wears the brand that sponsored that event as a sponsor. I mean, he's had a 30-year relationship with the company, and that's because I introduced them, because of a vision that I had, all over a golf outing. Over a golf outing, one golf outing, not like a 144 player golf outing, like a 20 player golf outing, like a middle of the day golf outing with 20 clients. That's it. So, yeah, you just gotta, nobody is going to give you permission. Nobody is going to ask you to run through and take something. You just have to do it. This is the world's reserved for people who do. I was in a look. I mean, my head was not anywhere near where I could have created back when I was sitting in that shack in, and working in outside services at a golf club. But as my mind cleared, right? I knew that I didn't want to be sitting in that shack. And I knew that like my back, like is survival. I wanted to make something of my life and do something with myself. So it just had to have that really truthful conversation, which was, okay, how are we going to get out of this spot that you're in right now? And I had always been fearful of sales. People had told me forever, oh, you could sell, you could sell. And I'm like, I don't want to, like I need a base salary. Yeah. Like I was full of fear. And finally I just said, like sometimes like you just don't have a choice. And I didn't know where else to go or what else to do. And so I saw that gap, and that's the next thing that I thought of. And when somebody said yes to me, I I ran with it and gave it everything I had. And one of two things was going to happen. It was either not going to be successful or it was. In this case, it was. If it wasn't successful, I don't know where I would have been, but this was.
Yeah.
So,
And we're here.
and we're here.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I think, like people get caught up in the perfect idea. There is no perfect idea. If you have a problem, chances are somebody else has that problem. If you have a solution to that problem, find one person that you can talk to about that problem and whether or not they would buy the solution that you can put to that problem, and or figure out a way to charge them to fix that problem. And if you can do that, if you can get one customer, then the chances are that you can get two, and then you can get three, because everything else is just kind of BS. Like that's what real entrepreneurship is. It's not getting people to tell you you have a good idea. It's not a fancy business plan. It's just taking action against solving problems. And that's what I've done.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? One of the things that I really just want to highlight to listeners, that something that you said is that you didn't know necessarily where things were going to go, but you just did the next thing or took the next step
Yes.
or like, and it started, it sounds like, honestly, even though all of your journey led into the next part of your journey, but one of the things that did help you get to where you needed to be was to be able to get into recovery so that you could have that clarity of mind to be able to see things in a way that maybe you couldn't have seen them before. And then you just, whenever you saw that next thing, you just gave it 100%. And I think that sometimes we forget that we don't need to know the whole answers. It's like you didn't probably, I can imagine, I can just imagine you, Jay, sitting at that sales, making those sales calls, right? To see if I can just get one agent to say yes to me, right? And I don't know how many calls you made, but I'm assuming it's how many was it before you got to the like, we can at least meet?
It doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And a dozen that was like, no, or you couldn't get nobody on the phone. But
Yeah.
you had one person that said, hey, I'll meet. And you know that I just had to go give it 100% at that opportunity. What's the worst thing that they could say? No. At least they've given me a little bit of a door in. And it is crazy to think about how those moments in time and just going with your gut. Cause I think that's hard for people to trust sometimes. But how did you kind of cultivate that, just going with your gut throughout your journey?
Yeah. I mean, well, there's been times when I haven't, and that's been times that those were my least successful in my life. It's a big lesson. I think I think understanding that you are your best advocate. It's not to say that you can't take input or feedback from people, but in the end, it's you, and you're the one whose head's on the chopping block, and you need to follow your path and not a path that somebody else thinks is best for you to follow. It's a really important lesson that a lot of entrepreneurs will get into something and they'll say like, "Well, I'm not a expert in this, so I'm going to find an expert." Yeah, you know, a lot of disruption happens from not being in industries. Like I wasn't in the golf world when I started a professional golf tournament. I'd never been to a golf tournament. I played some golf, but I really didn't play golf and like growing up. I played when I was in radio because I needed to eat large chunks of time because I wasn't working that much, right? So every industry, like when I got into the private jet business, I had never seen, been, or flown on a private jet. I think having an outsider's perspective is an incredible advantage to a ton of industries. But again, it really comes down to, and you say, like, I didn't know where I was going. I have no idea where I was going, and I don't know where I'm going to go now. Right. So you get to a certain stage in business where it's like, you might have an option where you could either sell the business or you could retire from the business, like, and those types of things exist. But, for the most part, you're just trying to have a really good day in revenue. And yeah, you do some advanced planning, but I don't know if I'm going to sell the business. I know that I'm friends with a lot of industry leaders. That I know. I know I'm respected in my business and industry. I know I've built a business that's got a solid foundation with a ton of customers, right? And clients who respect me and like me. And I feel the same towards them. So, that's how you succeed. You succeed by doing the little things on a moment to moment basis, right? You win the moments and the day follows. And then, that's just the way it is. I was watching the college baseball World Series, and there was a lot of debate about the Coastal Carolina coach and getting thrown out of the game and all that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You know what? I don't watch, but I did watch that. So
Yeah, it's a social media, right?
I did
So,
watch that those last games. So
but
that's
his,
LSU, you know what I mean?
yeah, 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 I brought it up because LSU. I know they just 2 wins. I love it. 2 wins and they win the College World Series. They whipped them pretty good. So, but he said something that stuck with me, and he said, "We're just trying to win every pitch. Like, we're not thinking about the inning. We're not thinking about the at bat. Baseball's a pitch by pitch game. We're trying to win pitch by pitch." And that's very early in my career how I had to approach things because I didn't have the mental capacity to see anything in the future because I was like in survival mode. And
Yeah.
then honestly, Christy, I've just stayed hungry since then and kept myself in survival mode the whole time because it's become part of who I am and my identity. I don't know anything else.
Well, and listen, what you're saying is something that when I look at people that I might know has taken big risk, or they did that next thing, or they didn't give themselves the back door to, like, you know what I'm saying, a safety net to fall. You just learn to show up and do the next thing. And I think, for those that are listening, that you're saying, okay, well, maybe I have a big idea, or maybe I don't know what's next, or maybe I just want to look for a different opportunity. I would agree 100% with you about it's not focusing on the result that you wanna get all the time. It's just focusing on the next thing and how do you do that next thing well, and putting in the reps or putting in whatever those inputs are that will ultimately yield some type of output, and hopefully it'll be a good output that you want. But I used to have a turtle on my desk. I actually still do at my home. It's not a real turtle, it's like a picture of a turtle trying to get to the sea, you know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
they have to make that little trek. But it's that quote that says, "It doesn't matter how fast you go as long as you do not stop," right? And so
Yes.
it sounds like what you've done in your life to lead you to where you are today is just not stopping and being able to try to do each moment. I like how you said that, win the moments to get
Yeah, I
to the
stole it. I stole it.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's Christy. That's what it is. I know it seems like a super oversimplification. I know that it seems super cliche. I don't know. Am I special? Like, are you special? Like, or do you feel you're special? Like, I feel like I do a really good job every day and I try and I care, but
I feel
like,
like I was just dropped down here and, I'm trying to do the best I can with what I've
right.
been given. That's the best way I can say it.
Yeah, right. And the best that you can is pretty good and better than if somebody came to you as opposed to your competition. And that's how I feel. And that's the level of care I put into my business across every business I've ever been in. I don't believe there's ever been one customer. I'm not saying I've been successful with every customer. That's not the way life works. But I don't think there's one customer who will say Jay didn't care. And, that means something to me. This probably is the most important point. I feel like I buried the lead. I used to think you needed to have the big idea to be successful. And I've had the big idea to be successful, but you don't need the big idea. There are plenty of pizza shops that have fed their owners significantly better than other pizza shops. There's a lot of different reasons why: taste, of course, location, right? Circumstances that, you know, can be controlled, some that can't. But it isn't always the idea. Sometimes it's just doing something better than somebody else is doing it. So execution is so much more important than the idea. It's still about solving problems. It's still about finding a gap and solving problems. Domino's came in and did something the local pizzerias couldn't, with their delivery promise. That solved a problem. That's why they were successful. It wasn't taste. They solved the problem, right? In fact, they had a taste issue after they were huge. And they came in, they fixed that, but it was fast service. I did a blog post on this. I don't think Dunkin' Donuts product is exceptionally good. But when you go to a Dunkin' Donuts, they know your name, they know your drink, and they put it in your hand inside of 35 seconds, and they make payment and checkout easier than anybody's ever made payment and checkout with their app. So, Starbucks had a lot more coffee shops than they did when they started. So, you know, you can win by just doing something that people already want better. There's
Yeah. Well, and I don't know about you, Jay, but I can even think about probably on your caddy days. I think about my early days. Mine was in the cashier line, and then I did
Yeah,
serve some tables. Okay. But I do remember, and I don't know where this came from, but I'm glad that I was taught this along the way. And what you're talking about is that I just try to do my best at no matter what it is that I was put at to do. And that has always yielded positive things. Doesn't mean that I haven't put my energies into stuff that maybe wasn't the best thing to put energy, of course. But I do think it's just that what you're talking about is how can we provide a service, whatever industry it is that you're in, that is better than the person next door? How can we make sure that what we're doing is quality? Because I think that does win out. And I don't think everybody's always looking at how can we make things better. I don't know if you think about that, but I don't think everybody
I
always looks at how can I make this better.
I think of it all the time. How about this? You talk about being a server. I went to a Cracker Barrel in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with my wife, Amy, when we were dating in 1997. We still talk about the server that we had at that Cracker Barrel. He was so good.
Yeah, I think well, and look, let me talk about this real quick. I know we're about to have to wrap up. But let's just talk about an unfair advantage that you can make in this day and time. You're
Mhm.
right. There are people that make an impression on you by the quality of service that they give, whether it be whether it's a product or how they're interacting with their customers or whatever that leaves a mark. But you could also probably remember the service that you had that was not good either. It's like two extremes, right? But I mean, that server hopefully went on to do some great things because they showed up in that job trying to be the best server that they could be. And that left a mark and reminded, that you
I'm going to
remember
tell
to
you.
this day.
I'm going to tell you what he did. The first encounter at the table, he walks up and he says, "Hello, hello." He pulls a plate of drinks out and he says, "I have waters. I have a Diet Coke. I have a regular Coke. And I have Mountain Dew. Can I interest you in any of these?" "I'll take an iced tea." "Yes." Boom. He puts an iced tea down. My wife says, "Take a water." He didn't ask us what we wanted to drink. He came over with drinks already in hand. Cracker Barrel used to have to
I've
wait.
never had that happen to me, though,
I never
right?
had it
He
happen
was
to me before.
prepared.
He was prepared. He walked over and had Cracker Barrels. A lot of times you had to wait, right? They have the gift shop, and so like you sit outside in the rocking chair. So when you sit down, you're either hungry or thirsty because you've been waiting for a minute. He comes over, he gives us our drinks without asking, just what do you want? And they're already poured, ice, the whole thing. And then he has biscuits and gravy or biscuits and honey. And he puts them down on the table and he goes, "And I brought your biscuits here." He goes,
And you didn't
"Yeah,
even have to ask for him. Oh, Lord, here we go.
you don't even have to ask for them." It's been 28 years and I still remember it. 28 years and I still remember that. It was a Cracker Barrel. It wasn't a five-star restaurant. So there are times that people in your life make an impact on you. You have no idea when you're going to make an impact on someone else. Just try to show up in every moment as hard as it is. I don't do it. I try. It's I think impossible for someone to do it 100% of the time. You have to forgive yourself when you don't. But like every interaction that you have with somebody, is completely unique to that person. So, like the next person I talk to, Christy, is going to have no frame of reference that you and I just had this conversation. And I need to treat them like that conversation is the only one I'm going to have with them today. And it's a difficult thing to do, but to the degree that you can do it, those are differentiating factors that in entrepreneurship can make you super successful. I just read a book by a friend of mine, Wayne Kimmel, 6 Degrees of Wayne Kimmel, right? Great book. It's on networking. He is a incredible venture capitalist. Didn't start out that way. He started out as a kid knocking on doors, and he built his business. And now, and he talks about through it, one of the things he looks for is two qualities in people. You know what those qualities are? Smart and nice.
Don't be an
There's no
a-hole.
barrier to entry to being nice. There's zero
That's
barrier
right.
to entry there. No cost, no anything. So,
Kindness goes a long way. Well, and Jay, I do think, and you think about that server, right? Part of that,
I
he was
do.
not only prepared, he was already predicting what your needs were before you even knew what you needed. And then he also was able to probably meet you with kindness. And I think that kindness really can go a long way. So speaking of kindness, Jay, if listeners have been listening to our conversation, they're like, you know what? I need to learn more about Jay. I might want to check out. I know you also got a swag business, right? Swag
I
business.
do. Yeah, merch. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we
Or
do.
if they want to kind of find and check that out, where can they find out more, whether it be your podcast or maybe they want some swag.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
some
love it.
swag.
All right, so the podcast is JSAP Chats because I'd like to think that we had just a nice chat. My email is jay at inked, INKDSTORES.com, inked stores, which obviously is the domain, inkstores.com. And then I post every day on LinkedIn, Christy. And when I say I post every day on LinkedIn, I post. I post every day. I write every single post on LinkedIn that is it's not AI generated. I write them, and they're my thoughts. And I'm not trying to target an ICP. I'm trying to be me, and my ICP will find me if they want me and like me. And that's the way I run my. That's the way I run my business. The way I run my life, and yeah, it's proven pretty good so far. So we're going to keep doing it.
Hey, well, look, I'll be honest with you. If the one thing that I'm still learning in this life, and I ain't figured it out, but I do think the more that you can show up you as authentic yourself, which takes us a minute to sometimes get to in life. But the better life goes because you're not trying to be somebody else. You're not trying to be somebody you're not. And you're just like, I feel like that's what happens when you get like, I feel like the old people at the point where they really get old, they're like, I don't give crap. This is who I am. This is what I want to be. But the further we can get to that in life, the more we can get that earlier, the better. Because then you just learn, hey, I'm going to show up and be me, and I don't need a permission to be me, and this is how it's going to be. You know what I mean?
If you can't show up and be yourself, chances are you have something about yourself you should change.
Well, and that's a whole nother episode, folks. That's a whole nother episode.
And you went really south. You went really southern on me right there. I want to get it
That's
down.
right. That's right. I got them strong roots, strong roots. Well,
Funny.
Jay, I just want to acknowledge you and appreciate you for coming and just sharing a little bit about your life story, but also just being able to take the time as you lived your journey to I feel like these are give back episodes where you're able to give back and say, guys, this is where I've went, but here's some truths that I've learned along the way. And if you can just take these truths and apply them, then anything can be possible for you too. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be able to come on the show today and share some of those insights with us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And by the way, if anybody's struggling with anything, drugs, alcohol, gambling, any type of addiction or anything, that my email's always open, j@inkstores.com. And like more than happy to have a conversation with loved one or whomever. I mean, there's such a better life out there. So I, Christy, appreciate the forum and the ability to come on, and it's an inspirational show, and I'm glad we were able to meet.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you saying that because, I don't know if you know this, Jay, but I'm a therapist by heart and by
Hmm.
career. And then I just come into inspiration space. But, addiction really is a hard thing. And if people can be able to find their way to recovery, there is a whole different life for them. But sometimes they need somebody that has walked the path to tell them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, keep on going towards that recovery and things are possible. So I appreciate you also being vulnerable enough to share your part of your story and your struggle that you had in your early 20s and how life has really changed and transformed for you since you made that choice to walk a different path and to enter into that recovery. So,
I felt like I was in therapy today. I loved it.
hey, yeah. kind of exited out because I still manage the therapy practice, but I exited out back in September. So I always love these interviews because I'm like, oh, I get to still use like some of this conversational because I love people and I love stories, and this is where my jam's at. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, your shirt comes and rings true because you're a. I did most of the talking, and a lot of people aren't capable of listening the way you did. So it was very nice.
Okay. Well, hey, yay. So I still got some of my listening skills because sometimes I feel like I talk a lot. So I'm glad to hear that.
Same.
Yeah. Well, if you
Awesome.
are listening to us, I just want to encourage y'all with this one last takeaway. Guess what, guys? You ain't got to win the lifetime. You just got to win the moments. And that's what Jay says. So we're going to call it there. Until next time.
That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.